Good morning, folks. We will just have a minute or two of letting everyone in that's joining the session this morning. It's just ticking over 10 o'clock. And we're expecting a few in today, so we will give them a moment. Morning, Jed. So we'll aim for about 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes past the hour, and then we will kick off. Unfortunately, with Teams, if you've used the Teams webinar tool before, you can't pause a recording. You can stop it and make a whole new one, but there's no pause function that's built into it, which is not amazing, particularly when we're starting a session. Hello, Tani. I see you there. Guest of honor.
No, not really.
We'll give it 1 more minute. I have to say I've been looking forward to this session for a little bit, for a few weeks. It's going to be a fun one. All right. Look, I might keep an eye on the people list and admit people as they're coming in, etc. But we might make a start as the session is going to take all the time we have, I'm sure. So look, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another Teaching Academy PD session for 2025-30. And the session today is looking at podcasting, which is not a new phenomenon. It's certainly been around for quite some time. But the beauty of it, I suppose, is that a good idea is still a good idea after no matter how long it basically takes. But we have a number of practitioners now at the uni who have been podcasting in various forms for a number of years. And so I like to run at least one session each year looking at the basics of putting a podcast together. And to sort of unpack a little bit what that term refers to, because it is quite diverse in terms of how it's interpreted by different staff. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I also have a number of exemplars, etc., that I want to show you. We also have a number of those podcasters with us today, some of them just starting out, some of them that have been doing it for a while. So I am really looking forward to sharing all of that with you as we go through. Most importantly, I am going to show you a tool that you can use to make your own podcast, and we will go through the process of making a podcast episode. Quick and dirty, as they say, but the end result may surprise you. And the tool we will be looking at is Spotify for Creators, which is the current form of a product that used to be called Anchor FM. For those of you that used to play around with Anchor, it was bought out by Spotify. They took all the best features and then sunk it, as all good multinationals will do. So let's start. I will change my board. I might share you the link to the board if you want to have a look at this in your own spaces. I'll switch it to a stream. And let's grab a share link for you. And I'll put that in the chat. So that can go in there. All right, so let's talk about podcasting a little bit. I remember being asked this probably about 8 years ago when I first started here, and I was talking to someone about podcasting and why the university didn't have a podcasting platform. And they said, "Oh, you mean sound grabs, right?" And I said, "Oh, what's a sound grab?" But effectively, to some people, the term podcasting refers simply to the capture and making available audio in any form really to students within their subject site. So when they say, oh yeah, I do podcasts for my students, they're talking about recording audio and embedding it within the learning materials. And we have examples of that today, and that view of podcasting is certainly not unique. A number of people still refer to them in that way. Technically, the technical definition for a podcast is play on demand, POD, cast. So it means capturing the audio, storing it usually in a third-party service. It may involve organizing that audio into a particular sequence, and that's where we get people talking about a series of podcasts, episodes in a podcast series, and then providing a means of accessing that content that's hosted elsewhere. And the most common one that we talk about with podcasts is through an RSS subscription, which effectively means if the person is using a piece of software to collect podcasts, and that's usually called a feed aggregator. These days, it's tools like Spotify, for example, that a lot of people have. It means that when they're out and about, they open the app, for example, and they have all of the episodes already loaded in there automatically waiting for them. And in some cases, this is something that students have in fact requested. We have examples of that today. So let's talk, before I go too much further, I want to show you some examples of podcasts being used at the uni. And the first one I want to show you is the wonderful Tani Nelson from Port Mac has put together a medical radiation science podcast called Professional Button Pushers. What I'm going to do with this is in fact share sound as well so you can hear what we're doing here. And I'll play it first before we have a brief chat with Tani about what this thing is and why she does it. So this is the Spotify for Creators homepage, if you will, or channel for Tani's show, Professional Button Pushers. I might play you a little bit of the trailer that's down the that's built in for the channel for people that are curious about what it is.
Even look like.
Whoops.
So I hope that by listening. Hello, my name is Tani Nelson and I'm the host of your new favourite podcast, Professional Button Pushers. I'm a trained diagnostic radiographer and I started this podcast with the idea of providing insight to the undergraduate medical radiation sciences and how multifaceted a career within the radiation sciences can be.
I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to embarrass you any further, Tani, although if you were worried about your voice being heard, you would never have done this. But can you tell us all about your experience doing this and why you started particularly? Where'd it come from?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Lockie. And I can tell you still don't get used to listening to your own voice back, that's for sure. Thanks for having me. I certainly want to say I'm not reinventing the wheel with my Professional Button Pushers podcast. But essentially, it sort of sparked, I'll take it back a step actually. One of my subjects is MRS 120, which is a single session, first session subject that's embedded into our undergraduate course within medical radiation science. And it spans 3 different streams of medical radiation science, which is diagnostic radiography, nuclear medicine, and radiation therapy. But it's more than that, it's really sort of the epitome of students' introduction in first year to the healthcare setting. And so I kind of sort of found, I've had this subject for a little bit, and I kind of found that students entering into the healthcare realm kind of came in with very little knowledge of the profession that they're entering into within the medical radiation sciences. And so I kind of thought there was this little gap that needed filling. And as any academic knows, there's always timetable restraints and we're kind of cut short with how long we have with our students. And I thought, how can I bring it to them in a different way that also makes it quite accessible for clinicians? And so my podcast's essentially designed as an extracurricular podcast that taps into a bit more of an informal curriculum, I suppose, that interviews everyday clinicians in the sense of trying to utilise them as guest lecturers, where we can't necessarily invite them to the classroom because it's not really that feasible. We have Port Macquarie and Wagga campuses, and a lot of clinicians are based, that I talk to are international or national. So a podcast sort of really allowed for the accessibility both to the interviewee, but also as that sort of short digest on the run for my undergraduate students. And since it's an informal curriculum, I know that with 200 students in my cohort, there's a wide variety of learning styles, and they're sort of overwhelmed with the resources that are available to them. But if a short digest in the sense of an audio grab on the way to uni is something that works, then I find that it provides them with some industry insight. Now I don't delve deeper into my podcast whatsoever, but I kind of I chat to like intensivists, cardiologists, a forensic radiographer. I talk to someone from the Ministry of Health, just to sort of paint a picture of what a career within the medical radiation sciences can look like, because I find they come in with very little idea of what it might look like upon graduation.
That all sounds amazing to me, and I would like to also just confirm, I think we've had this chat separately, but you also mentioned that basically the way you set this up is that you simply organize a Zoom meeting with the people that you want on your show, effectively on your podcast, and that it's not particularly confronting because you're using, I suppose, a known medium just to kind of capture that content. You find that pretty easy?
Yeah. I certainly again, I'm no tech savvy person. I just wanted to find something that was efficient, fast, that I could use, and simplified for me, really, but also accessible for those interviewees at any time, wherever they might be located. And Zoom's an easy platform that most people post-COVID or during COVID are pretty familiar with. And I find when you mention to clinicians that you want to interview them for first year undergrads, they get quite nervous in a podcast setting. So I really try to reiterate that, I'll send you a Zoom link and it'll just be like a conversation. I can see you, but I'm just going to extract the audio for the podcast and then edit it afterwards. So it is designed to be a colloquial chat. It's in no way, shape or form is it a polished performance. But I do certainly provide the interviewees with their questions ahead of time, because I know that when you listen to a podcast yourself, you kind of, if there's any pauses, you lose listeners. So I kind of set them with some preloaded questions, but then I throw some curveballs at them along the way as well, just for a little bit of authenticity and capturing them a little bit off guard.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you've got that whole phenomenon where if people know they're being recorded and that it's going to be put into a podcast, for example, or a recording that's going to be listened to by others, it's almost not their authentic self a lot of the time. You have to try and break down those barriers a little bit. Otherwise, they're putting so much thought into how do I need to present? Sometimes even how I need to look, even though you've said it's just going to be audio. And I've seen people very dressy in something that's going to end up as an MP3 file. So it's quite funny.
Absolutely. I think breaking down those barriers, I play a few games at the start. In my new seasons, it sounds ridiculous, like I've got new seasons. I don't. I just release a few at the start of each session. Got a few
new seasons. Yeah. Have you guys tuned into season 3? It's amazing. Yeah.
But I've tried to play some icebreakers just to break it down for them. Make them feel a bit more at ease on the virtual couch.
Look, that's wonderful, and really appreciate you taking the time to kind of chat to us about the show. I might come back to you a bit later if I can, and I'm going to move through a couple of other examples before we start playing with the tool itself. So the next one I want to share with people is in the Master of Education Teacher Librarianship course. They went through a process a couple of years ago, got some funding, and published against this work as well, about the idea of changing the format for the way that some of the core curriculum is delivered. So they recorded a bunch of audio, hosted it within the CSU ThinkSpace site, and then made it a part of the structure of the learning materials in the subject. So we're going to have a look at what that looks like. So here's one of the subjects, ETL 513, and what we find inside their topics is that at the bottom of the first page in each of the modules, they have these pre-recorded podcasts that effectively sometimes will involve interviews with the teaching staff addressing some of the key concepts and key learnings, and other times effectively will be lecture-esque, mini lecture, concept lecture-esque type formats as well, to provide that material to students in different formats. And again, talking to Kay O'Donnell, apologies if I've pronounced that incorrectly, but Kay told me this morning that part of that process came about based on feedback from students again, and also trying to cater to that knowledge that people sort of engage with the course in different ways and want the material in different ways. If they're not necessarily just going to swallow a whole bunch of text, for example, maybe some images, how do we diversify? How do we look at multimodality? So that is quite interesting, and I have provided some more detail on the Padlet wall about some of the ideas that went into creating that collection. What I might show you, actually clicking on one of those podcast links, it's a hyperlink on the page which opens up ThinkSpace, the CSU WordPress server, and the media has been recorded, uploaded into WordPress, and it has its own kind of built-in media player in this other side. So as opposed to hosting it in a service like Spotify, for example, the audio file is held just on this separate server, and students come here and will hit the play button and start listening to it. So that's a different take on the notion of podcasting. And in that case, it's a part of the actual curriculum itself, the way that it's delivered. All right, next one. We have Dolores and Jane Lawrence is here as well. Dolores Dooley and Jane Lawrence from the Midwifery team, who've just made their first podcast just yesterday, in fact. So I'm putting them on the spot here, but they did their first meeting in Zoom. They had their catch up. They had a script written. There was a whole lot of I'm not going to say angst. I want to say because it was the first time, there was a lot of excitement about this process. And then getting that audio up into the Spotify for Creators platform, which we did yesterday. And I think maybe I'm just going to play a second of it just to see how we're going here.
Hello, my name is Tani Nelson.
No, that's Tani Nelson. That's no good to us.
That's scary.
Click on the right play. I was going to say, Tani, you're everywhere. Let's go with this one.
Okay, so welcome to Midwifery Matters, the Charles Church podcast dedicated to exploring all things midwifery.
There you are. You're famous now, Dolores. I love it. Are you going to come off mute and talk to me about this process and how you ended up here and how you're feeling about it today, the day after?
Yeah, I hate my voice too. He showed us yours last night, Tani, and I thought, oh, I want to just delete ours, but it's okay. It was fun. We had in school intensive a month or so ago, and there was just a chat with students around what podcasts they were listening to, what midwifery podcasts, and our students are working clinically while studying, so they quite often struggle getting to our Zoom sessions. So they actually suggested, hey, why don't we, well, I actually flippantly said, oh, maybe we should do podcasts, and they said that would be a great idea. So I thought, well, we'll give it a go. And I called Lachlan a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, it just happened. And staff in the team, like we hope to kind of extend out to industry and get them to talk as well. But at the moment, it's just a quick and dirty session just to get our local team to help us. So thanks, Lachlan.
Look, it's my pleasure, and onwards and upwards, as they say. You've got the first one in, so you've basically done all the hard work now. The rest of it is just finessing that over time, and it is great to listen back to older recordings once you've made a few and see how your approach has changed, etc. So look, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how that goes for the rest of the subject, and then into other subjects and the rest of the team. The more that are involved with it, the happier I am, that's for sure. All right, let's look. My pleasure. Let's keep going because I do have to get into showing everyone how to use the tool itself. So I have maybe one more example that I'm going to show you. Kim Bailey, who sadly is no longer at the uni, she's gone back to making squillions as a legal practitioner, was absolutely prolific in the podcasting space. She loved to use audio in different forms to the students. So she had a live podcast that she was putting into Anchor, the same as what we've been looking at this morning with Spotify. And I just had a peek at the subject she used to teach into, Law 114, which is torts law. And I was just curious to see where that content ended up, if she was still, if they're still using the audio, etc. So I had a bit of a sneak peek yesterday, and what I noticed was that within the topics, so the content itself, they have in fact taken the audio material from some of the podcasts and uploaded them directly into the subject site. So this is no longer being hosted on a third-party service. They've got the audio file and embedded it at the start of the topic to provide an overview. So we'll give Kim a listen for a moment.
Welcome to Topic 1. This week we will start by considering what tort law is.
Okay, we definitely don't want to hear what tort law is this morning, but you get the idea. So she's providing an overview of each of the topics. 5 minutes or less, I think, was her golden rule for this type of audio capture. She certainly made longer ones when they were hosted on Spotify that were either discussions with other practitioners, like Tani was talking about. Other times it was other members of her teaching team that were getting together, and I think Dolores and Jane are taking that approach some of the time, getting others within the midwifery team together to basically have those discussions in and around sort of key concepts and other things going on within the discipline. Yeah, lots of different approaches here, and all referred to in different ways as podcasts. So that's the amount of time I'm going to spend on background or context for podcasts. I now really want to get into showing you the platform. Before we get into Spotify for Creators, I'm just going to run a little bit of some suggestions, I suppose, around the brainstorming process that you may want to think about before making your own podcast. But I'm certainly not going to dwell on this for too long. So a few critical questions. And I'll start with, you're going to see in a minute just how easy it is to basically get content into one of these platforms for hosting your audio and then providing it out to students. Once you've done that once or twice, it's going to be very, very easy and straightforward for you. However, there are some probably some questions you may want to think about in terms of how your audience wants to engage with the content. If you're lucky enough to have the students telling you, we really want you to make some podcasts for us to be able to subscribe to and listen to when we're working out or doing the groceries or on the train or whatever the case may be, great, you're already being steered towards a podcast. If they're saying, we want the content to be provided to us in other forms in the subject site. Well, that's starting to say embedded audio, so that helps. So if you can get any insight into the preferences of your audience, then you can also think about how long it's going to be. Generally, we don't have kind of podcasts that are going to go for longer than really probably about half an hour. If it's going longer than that, then there's probably going to be a lot of structure and planning that are going to be required for it to be an enjoyable listening experience. I don't know if you've ever listened to an audio recording of one of your Zoom tutorials, for example, like an online meeting with the students, just as audio without any of the other types of stimuli going on. It's not an amazing experience to listen to without structure, without sequence. So you need to think a little bit about those things when you're putting a recording together. And the longer it goes, the more planning it's going to take. Is it going to connect to any other parts of the subject or learning activity, or is it a scaffolding satellite type resource, or is it a direct part of the actual content that's being delivered? Register and tone's an interesting one. Some people take a very formal approach when they're recording themselves, knowing that it's going to be provided ongoing, not just within a particular subject, but to a wider audience perhaps. And so the register there that's being used is quite formal. The language that's being used, even the intonation that's being used. So the type of language that you're using and your pitch, all the rest of it. It's probably worth thinking about that before you start recording as well. How do I want to sound? Do I want this to be kind of a laid back, fairly casual conversation? Or is this more going to be just me talking as the authority on a particular topic? All of those things are worth thinking about before you start trying to do this for the first time. And even after people write out scripts and put all that thinking into place, you're still going to find, I guarantee, the first few times that you listen to yourself in a recording like this, we are highly self-critical creatures, I suppose, is how I would put this. So you listen to yourself and go, oh, I sound terrible. It needs to be redone. It needs to be redone. If you can steer away from that the first few times that you make a podcast and go a bit easy on yourself and go, the important thing is just getting them out there to begin with, and I will refine this process over time and refine my voice in this space. All right, so I think we might get into the platform itself so I can show you how easy it is to use Spotify for creators. The other tips that I have in here about structure and organization and things, if we've got time, we might come back to it, but I think it's more important that you see the platform and we look at how to make this. So the tool that we're going to use is Spotify for Creators, and it requires that you have an email account to use for this. I might open up the show itself, which this is not doing because it's an image, not a link. Let's go with a new tab and go creators.spotify.com is the base page that we are looking for. And this service will require you to either sign up if you haven't got a Spotify account, and you can use Gmail, Hotmail, just a normal email address you can register for. I found it easiest just signing up with a Google account if you've got one. And I just use my CSU address. So it also is a Google account. So that's not a problem to sign up with your Gmail account. You'll need to go through that process of signing up and verifying your email address. It's going to take you, I want to say 15 to 20 minutes in the first instance to get it verified and confirmed and be able to start creating and publishing episodes. So you need to work through that process of signing up for Spotify for Creators. This dashboard that we're looking at once you sign in will show you the details on consumption of your podcast. But what I want to get into here is creating a new episode. So over here on the left, we've got add a new episode. And we've got two options here. The one on the right refers to you dragging and dropping an audio file, and this is where having a meeting in Zoom and getting the audio out of Zoom to upload into the platform will happen. So that's where we're going to end up dragging our audio file. You'll see the formats that are identified here, MP3, M4A, WAV, etc. Zoom will give you an M4A file if you're looking for it. And where we find those, if I jump into the Zoom portal, charlessturt.zoom.us, sign into the Zoom portal. This is assuming that you've had a Zoom meeting and you're ready to get the audio file. You're going to go into your recordings folder, find one of the video recordings. So I'll pick on one of these, that'll do. Select the recording, and then you'll see the formats that are available underneath in Zoom, including the audio file. And if you go across to the right, you can download the audio track right here. So we're not interested in video. We're going to get audio here to download. Download the audio track. It'll download to your downloads folder. It'll have a fairly nonsensical name, which is probably makes sense to Zoom, but not to the rest of us. So you may want to rename it. Okay, so I've got an audio file there ready to go. It's going to be much larger than this for you, probably depending on the size of your recording. And then we can go back to Spotify for Creators, drag our audio in here. It will upload the audio in the background, and then we can start populating the details for our episode. Sample episode. Put in a description. So think of a 1 or 2 sentence blurb for your audience. So stuff going in here. It'll give you a preview of what it's going to look like if we were to embed the Spotify for Creators player. You can have a listen to it. I have no idea what's in that audio file that I just uploaded, by the way. So it could be just about anything, but you can listen to it here. Scroll down, you've got the option here to set the thumbnail or the artwork for the episode. That only really matters, I suppose, in terms of people looking at the page, but it will appear inside the embedded player wherever you happen to put that. It'll ask you a few questions. Have you got explicit content happening? Are you promoting other products in there? They're probably going to be no. There are some options like adding polls and things to listeners, but this is only going to impact them if they're working with it either embedded or going to your Spotify channel. So you can probably leave most of this. Tani mentioned seasons before. If you've been doing this for a while, you're probably going to need to give it a little bit of structure, but probably going to be first season, maybe your second or first episode, depending. But you can make a trailer, which is what we were listening to before, which will sit on your base page for anyone wanting to have a listen to, I suppose, a promotional clip about what the podcast is for. Otherwise, it's just going to be a full episode. And then decide whether or not you want people commenting on your podcast on the Spotify channel as well. So you may want to turn that off as well. Once that happens, we hit next. We get a summary. And then when do you want to publish it? Once you click now, it's going to take you about 10 to 15 minutes for it to be live and available. Or you can schedule a time if you're not comfortable with it happening on the spot. And then we hit publish. And that's it, basically. The podcast is now out there, available. We can hit copy if we wanted to give someone a direct hyperlink to it, to grab a link. So I've now got 2 episodes sitting on my channel. And before I go any further, I can see Tamika has a question. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, Lachlan, and you might go through this. Is there a way that it can only be seen? Like, is this now anybody who's got Spotify can see this?
Yes is the answer if they go searching for it.
Yeah.
There are millions and millions of podcasts, however, and people that are doing it professionally, I suppose, are spending money and time to make sure that theirs are found before yours in any way, shape or form.
Yep.
So, but yes, it is out in the public.
Yep. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Now, at this point, I've got a couple of episodes going here. Before I show you a product called Riverside, which is part of Spotify for creators and allows you to do fancy things like add music and do editing of your podcast, etc. if you want to, I will show you what we can end up doing with our podcast, because from our channel, if we go back to the homepage, and I've had 3 plays of this podcast so far, we can actually get an embed code to share this channel. So what I might do is grab that link, put it into a browser for a second just to see how it appears to people. And then what you'll find with these 3 dots at the top is that we can in fact get an embed code, and you can either get an embed code that will just embed 1 episode if that's what you're after, or you can get an embed code to the entire channel that you can drop into your Brightspace site. So if I give you an example here, let's see what I got here. This one will do. On my, get rid of the announcements. There it is. That is the podcast channel embedded within my activity feed on my subject homepage. So we would just create a new activity feed post, click within the content area for the activity feed message. I'm going to go insert stuff. And what I'm looking for here is enter the embed code. And at that point, I can paste that in. That's not an embed code, Lachlan. Let's go back to this, share, embed. Right, sorry, here's the code. Grab the code. And now I'm going to embed it. There it is. So that might be for some of the LROs and EDs, etc., if you're interested in that process as well. We hit next, allow the preview if you want to see what it looks like, but it's going to give us a dynamic resizing container for our podcast playback. I'd probably turn off comments on your homepage unless you want the students writing just about anything on there. And post. And there it is, same thing again. So this is an episode embed to one particular episode. This is the whole channel, which will show me the latest episode within it. And the students can just hit play to listen to that. Hello everyone and welcome to Brightspace Bites. I'm not going to subject you to any more of that, but you get the idea. So that is one way of providing access to your podcast. The other ways that we want to talk about are giving students the RSS feed, where we get that information from, and hyperlinks directly to individual episodes. So if we go and have a look at what Dolores and Jane have done when they made that podcast yesterday, the first thing that they did after they published was send an announcement out to students. And if we open up the announcement in full screen, they then provide 3 different ways that the students can access it. So for those wanting to subscribe, there's the RSS feed. And if they've got a tool or an aggregator feed that will pick up podcast information and subscriptions like Spotify, or there's a million others and I can't think of a single one off the top of my head right now, but I will, they'll all come to me in a minute. You can get a link directly to the episode, and you can also give them a link to the channel homepage. So that's generally a good idea in terms of promoting and getting people to get to the content quickly and easily. Let's go back to our episode that we created in Spotify for Creators, and we'll have a look at what we can do with it. I'm going to get back to my channel. What I am interested in is getting the settings, so where we find that information. So let's head home. See if I can find my settings. Let's go with creators.spotify.com. So I get the menu on the left here. Okay, so if we look at our settings down the bottom here, we can look at the availability for the show. If you want to change your description after the fact, you can do that. If you want to change your art for the show, you can do that. All of this information that you put in place when you create your channel, you can modify it later. So don't be worried if you've put the wrong information and then you want to update it later on, you can do that. If we go into the availability tab, this is where you're going to find the address for the page to give to people and the RSS link to give to students. So both of those pieces of information are available underneath the availability tab in your settings area in the Spotify for Creators channel. So that's how you can get it out there. You can embed it, give them the RSS feed, give them the link to either channel, individual episodes or the whole show. Let's have a play with Riverside now so you can see what else you can do with your podcast. When we create a new episode, as I mentioned before, you have the option of either uploading audio, which you can then edit later, or you can in fact record it on the spot. And if you're going to do that, not using Zoom, for example, but actually recording inside this platform, you're using a tool called Riverside. And this is the same tool that will open up if you want to edit your Zoom uploaded video later on. So you may have to install this the first time when you click on it, but it is a pretty intuitive and straightforward platform. You can record on the spot, as I said, or you can upload your audio in here as well. It is owned and connected to Spotify. So let's just record something on the spot. I'm going to go audio. It'll pick it up. It's using the camera and microphone from this computer. I can see the audio is being picked up. Great, record. Okay, we get a countdown. So this is just another way of capturing the audio if you want to. And now we're getting me talking, getting ready to put my content together. So Zoom's handy if you're meeting with other people, for example, and you're having your discussion in your podcast that might involve others. You can just give them the meeting link and get the audio. But if you have something prepared and you just wanted to record yourself on the spot and then start working with that file, you could use Riverside for that purpose. And then you hit stop when you're ready. And then we can start working on that file. We get a button down here that says, are we ready to continue editing? Yes, I am. And if you're familiar with Panopto, for example, what we're going to see down the bottom here in a second is that audio continuum where we can see our peaks and troughs of our recording that we can start adding other things to, or cropping, etc. It's just going to process in the background now. So there's our audio track that goes for 37 seconds or 27 seconds or whatever, and we can start doing things to it. So one of the things we can start doing is selecting parts of this audio, left click and drag, take out that, take out that, take out that, and we would hit the cut option each time. So there is a delete button, which will get rid of sections if you don't want them. We can also create sections. If we get to a part and say, actually, what I want to do here is split this and maybe put in some kind of musical effect in between that part of what I'm saying and the next thing. So what I need to do is to separate this into sections. And the section option is right here. It's that first one. We're going to split it. So now we have two chunks, and maybe I want to put in another sound effect here. So I'm going to split that. And you can listen to each of these. Just move the slider wherever you want and hit play, just if you're not sure if that's the right spot, etc. So I've split this up into 3 different sections. Now I'm going to have a look at the fancy things that I can do with my recording. The first thing I want to show you is that there is an AI toolset built into Riverside. The AI producer function in the top right-hand corner will in fact allow you to do things like smooth your speech and remove any of those filler words, ums, ahs, clicks, and other bits and pieces. It will remove them automatically. So it'll scan it and then delete those. And then you get to listen to it and decide, do you want to keep that or do you want to actually leave them in? So you're more than welcome to play around with some of the AI tools. It'll also have a look at where you've got pregnant pauses, so to speak. That wasn't a midwifery joke, Dolores, I promise. And you can actually control the pacing of your recording if you want to. And you may also find that some of the other tools that will enhance the audio sound, normalize the volume levels, all that kind of stuff are part of this tool set. So the AI producer is pretty nifty. Have a play around with that. But what I really want to do is look at what other things I can add into my podcast. We have a music option here over on the right, and this is where the fun stuff lives. We have longer music tracks, shorter music tracks. In the past, I've used things like etc. If you want to split up the different parts of your audio, you can do that. Most people want a starting track, I suppose. What's going to happen at the start of the podcast before I start talking? At which point you would be looking through the music list and deciding. This is a very, very long list that you can work through. Have a listen to them. Oh, it's like a murder mystery or something. No, that's not my podcast music. Oh, there's more of it. No, I don't think so. Romantic. Well, let's go with that. Fine. Anyway, you get the idea. Listen through the tracks, decide which one you like, and then once you've got it there, hit the plus sign to the right. The music is royalty free. And you'll see over here that what's actually happened is that the music track has added for the duration sitting in the background of me talking. So you may have heard when Tani was doing her backing, the promo trailer, you had music playing in the background while you were talking. That's what happens when you add the track to directly underneath your existing spoken voice, etc., you can click the plus I option here to the left and add music from here, and that will give you your intro track. So that's the thing that I'm looking for rather than this one that's underneath. I might remove that and put it right at the beginning. Hit the plus icon, add in music, choose the music that we want to use. I want that one. Yep, that'll do. And then that has added that in before I actually start talking. That thing goes for 3 minutes though, which means I'm going to have to crop it. So at that point, I can either left click and drag to make it as long or as short as I want, move your slider around, etc., and get to the beginning of the page. Which of course it's not going to do for me now. Oh, there we go. Right, so there's the beginning. I can make that as long or as short as I want. You can have a listen to it and play it through if you like. Maybe I need to reset this somehow. Hang on, we'll reload. Oh, it's taken me out of it altogether. Well done, me. So does everyone get the idea of what I was trying to do there with Riverside? It basically will add in sound effects, music effects, backing tracks, splitting sounds if you want to join together different parts of your podcast. All of those things are very easy to do inside this tool. So you can either just upload your Zoom audio, or you can augment it, enhance it, or edit it with that Riverside tool. In terms of your actual episode list inside Spotify for Creators, so I can see that question from Jane there, can we do this to our Zoom recording? The answer is yes. You can either drag in your Zoom recording here at the beginning when you've got the audio, or if we go back to our episode list, we can edit one of these episodes. But the way that we actually edit it is that we have to actually I think you have to unshare it and then edit it. Let me have a look if I can find where that is. Tani, feel free to weigh in here.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to jump in. I often if mine are unfinished, I'll just leave them as a draft. So before you get to this stage and publish it, you can either publish or you can schedule. But if you just go to hit close, it will ask you to save as a draft, and so it will leave it as an unfinished audio recording at which you can come back and you can either edit in Riverside or you can add additional Zoom recordings either side. Say if you've got a Zoom finale, a Zoom intro, any other pieces that you want, you can stitch those together as well. So I normally leave mine, like I think I have 8 that are saved as a draft at the moment, just sitting there unpublished because I'm still working on pieces of them.
You can unpublish them. I have done this. I'll just have to find out exactly which screen it's on to do it. We might have to open the episode itself, but you can unpublish it and then edit it, Jane, as long as you've got more than one. So I have done that a couple of times in the last few days. So I'll find out where that is and show you how it's done. But you can definitely work on it after the fact as well. Although ideally you want to be, doing this before you publish for the first time moving forward. Right, so let's go back to my Padlet board and see where we're up to in terms of today's session. Let me just split that because we are approaching time. Let's change that back to the timeline. Okay, so we had a look at our exemplars. I talked a little bit about some of the questions you may want to think about before you set it up. We had a look at Spotify for Creators, which is where you're going to host your audio before you provide it. I talked a little bit about sharing the podcasts, and if you recall, we looked at providing different ways of accessing the channel, either giving the students the RSS feed so they can subscribe with their own podcasting player, or giving them the link directly to the episode that you've just made. You can give them the link to the actual page for your whole channel so they can look through the list, or alternatively, you can embed the entire podcast itself on your homepage, for example, or in your learning materials somewhere. So you can provide access to the podcast in a number of different ways. It's pretty versatile. All right, I'm going to show you a couple of things to think about if you're looking at just adding the audio directly to your subject sites. And you may be already familiar with this process, so bear with me for a moment. If we go into, let's find my sandbox. Yeah, here we go. If you've got an audio file that you just want to add directly to your subject site, so instead of hosting it in a podcasting service, you want to record audio and provide it to students directly as part of the content, you can go into your content area. I will find a folder, and we have some examples that I've added here, and 3 different ways that you can provide the audio to students. So if I edit this, the first way assumes that you've got that audio hosted somewhere. Think YouTube, for example, or if it's hosted in a service like Spotify, you can literally just highlight text in your content, left click and drag, which brings up this little bar, and you can add the hyperlink. Given the link, it'll open up the player elsewhere, and that's exactly what they were doing in the teacher librarianship subject. There's the highlighted text with a link to open up audio hosted somewhere else. The other option that we have is to actually add audio files directly into Brightspace, which will give you the media player that looks like this, and it will play back the audio when the students hit the play button. Is there some audio here? Maybe not. 11 minutes of me saying nothing. That's excellent. You can hit the 3 dots and in fact change the playback speed, etc. So you may have heard of your students wanting to listen to things in 1.5 times speed, double speed, etc. All of that is built into the native Brightspace player, as well as the ability to download the audio file. So at that point, the way that we do that is we go insert stuff in the Brightspace player, find the audio file that you should have downloaded to your computer. So if this was a Zoom recording that you got the audio, same thing, find the recording, browse for the recording. So if we find our sample audio file and then hit open, loads it into the site. We can then hit upload. And the way that Brightspace deals with those, there's a preview underneath, is to create that embedded player. Sorry, it wants some text on the page. Text on the page. What are the students going to see to click on? Or it sits behind the actual player as well. So let's hit insert. Oh, it's a tool link. There you go. See how I hover the mouse there? Text on the page. That's what we're looking for. So that's adding audio directly to the site. And the third option I've got here is if you've put the audio into Panopto, for example, the same as we do for our video materials that we want for ongoing use, you load them into your Panopto master folder. And then when you embed them using the Panopto Deep Link tool, this is how that player looks. So it's not like the video where it's full size with the video screen above it, for example. It gives a condensed version of it when you upload it for the first time. So I'll go through that process now. Again, insert stuff, find the Panopto Deep Link tool, and then find where you've stored the audio. So as I said, if hopefully it's in your master folder, I'm going to just look in my folder because I know I've got an audio file there. There's audio. Insert that. It'll give us a preview. So you can see it puts that disclaimer on the front when we use the Panopto tool, and then the player itself is there. So that is 3 different ways of adding audio content directly to the subject site if you want to house them in there. One of them adds them to the content for the subject. The others are links out to external materials. So this way of uploading the files locally gives you the Brightspace player. The other ways are hyperlinks, which open the video from somewhere else. All right, so that's 3 different ways of getting audio into your subject site if you're not going to create a podcast as such. you can also add the content to your add the audio to your content directly. And last but not least, I also have an interesting article that you may want to have a read about, where the University of Salford, for example, uses podcasts across many of its subjects, many of its disciplines. They've won a lot of awards about it, and I have a link to the article there for you to have a read if you're interested. But I will stop there and have a look. We've got some questions there. Jacqueline says, yes, we can upload files, but the preference is not to upload large files to Brightspace. And then there's a question mark. Yes. So the preference is definitely to host them in a service where our storage cap is not impacted for the LMS. So Panopto would be the answer rather than housing them directly in the subject site. However, a lot of the audio files, depending on what they're used for, if they're small, only 5 or less minutes, for example, it's not going to impact on that cap. So size of the audio would be the thing I used to think about first, whether it was directly in the master subject, content collection, or in Panopto. I also don't really like the look of the Panopto media player for audio. It's that big black rectangle, doesn't look as nice as the embedded player. So if I was not going to make a podcast and I wanted to just embed audio directly within the learning materials of the subject, I would try and make sure that it's fairly short, and then I'd add it to the master folder. But if it was going to be long, like a lecture size, anything more than probably about 15 minutes, for example, put it in the Panopto folder. I'm not sure if that answers the question for you, but it's really about the size of the file and the duration. Sue says, if you embed the podcast in a subject site and you want it moved to the master site, will it go over correctly so it can be used across? If it's put in the master folder first or originally, then it will be fine in all subsequent iterations of the subject. So you may be starting in the session subject side, but really this needs to be set up properly for ongoing use within the master site, the same as our other kind of provisioning rules. I hope that answers the question, Sue. Yep. All right, look, we are a couple of minutes away from time anyway. Tani, can I ask you to, I guess, provide any wisdom at the end of this session? Tell me, I suppose, from what I've been saying, have I been speaking complete garbage, or are there things in there that you think probably are important takeaways? What are your golden tips for this crowd?
Well, your golden tips, goodness me. First and foremost, I would think about accessibility. Do you know, you want to think about how your students are going to engage and what is going to be the easiest way for them to engage. I use QR codes in my study guides and align it to weekly content, and they can just use a QR code that takes them straight to the Spotify site. I also think about it, and I hadn't really thought about this when I first started it, is the analytics in the background can give you a really good indication of who's listening to you. And so Spotify actually provides really great analytics in the background. And somebody else asked a question earlier about whether everybody can access it. And everybody can access, obviously, anything that's on Spotify. And it's nice to see the countries that you have the reach to. There's a lot of countries that also pick up this podcast. I don't know how, but I don't promote it anywhere else other than my first year students. But I use a disclaimer basically that just says views and discussions within the podcast are not, those of the institutions of which or organisations of which these people are affiliated with. Because I don't want there to be any, they're coming on as colloquial chats and insight to the profession. So I don't know what that would do legally in the background. Probably need Kim Bailey to help us with that. But I do have a little disclaimer just so that it is seen as an informal chat and podcast episode, but it is aligned to weekly content that I deliver within the subject, and then it's culminated in their study guide at the end of each week with a QR code. Accessibility mainly is what I would think.
And where does the QR code come from, Tani?
I generate the QR code myself.
You're making it with a QR code generator. I've got you.
Yeah.
Have you got a hot tip for us? Which tool do you use to create your QR codes?
Again, not rocket science here. I just Google free QR
code generator. Yeah, got it. I can't think of the name of the one that I've used in the past, but I wasn't sure whether the Spotify platform also provides QR codes to episodes or not. But I'll have a look. Thank you for the tip though. And I will add another card to the Padlet board with a QR code generator afterwards as well. So look, I am happy to hang around for any questions that people have at this point as well. But for those of you that are pressed for time, etc., I want to say a big thank you for coming out and joining us for today's workshop. And a big thank you to Tani, to Dolores, to Jane, and the other creators in this space. More, we want more. We love it all. And thank you. We look forward to doing another one of these, maybe not in 60, but we'll do one towards the end of the year as well and see where everybody is up to. Thank you again. I'll stop the recording there and hang around for questions. Thank you, folks.